So one of you asked me to make this video, and here it is. Today, I'm going to talk about toxic positivity. We're going to talk about what that means, how and why a lot of women seem to be really focused on this overly positive approach to life and what that actually does to relationships and particularly to men in relationships and how it can result in emotional suppression that can actually do a lot of damage to an individual and to a marriage. So we're going to look at this in the context of relationships, marriage, and divorce. If you don't know me yet, I'm Rachael Sloan. I'm a master NLP practitioner and a certified life coach. And I'm also the creator of Better Beyond Divorce, which is a unique and customized coaching program designed specifically for men who might be like a lot of you, who are trying to move on, trying to get healthy, get happy, and regain their confidence to move forward into a richer, more connected life after divorce. Make sure that you stick around to the end of this video because after we explore these ideas of toxic positivity and emotional suppression, I'm also going to share a simple but powerful way for you to start recovering from the effects of that emotional suppression today. As always, guys, if you like these videos, if you're finding them helpful, please subscribe to my channel. You can also click the join button to join as a paying member, and you'll get all kinds of extra bonuses if you do that. So make sure you check it out. All right, so toxic positivity, what am I talking about? If you're not familiar with this term, what it refers to is this tendency, it's really a fad, in my opinion, right now in the self-help, the personal development world, to really focus on the positive. And honestly, the basis of this approach isn't bad, right? It's about focusing on what you want more of in your life. And the premise is that if you stay hung up on the negative, if you focus on negative emotions, on negative thoughts, that you're creating more of the same. You're strengthening those negative neural pathways. You are making it easier for your body to default into those negative emotions. And some people will even say that you're attracting more negativity into your life. So, a lot of coaches, even some therapists, a lot of gurus out there are teaching people to focus on the positive, focus on what you want to create, what you want to experience, what you want to feel, instead of focusing on the negative. And that sounds great. And it actually can be a really powerful tool to fully visualize and imagine what you want. But it can also go a bit too far. And this is when we start talking about this phrase toxic positivity. The idea is that there is no more room for any negative emotional experience, for any negative thought. Basically, it's let's not be human anymore, right? And it can also look like sticking your head in the sand, only focusing on the good things and completely ignoring anything negative. But focusing only on the positive can put a lot of pressure on someone because the honest truth is that we all have some negative habits. We have some negative habits of thinking, negative habits of feeling. And when you try to only focus on the positive, and frankly, negative things also happen in your day-to-day life, right? So when you try to ignore those and only focus on the positive, it gets stressful. And that's where we get this whole concept of toxic positivity. So the viewer, the one of you who asked for this video, was kind enough to share some of his story with me. And I think some elements of it might sound really familiar to the rest of you. So he had the experience of his wife really wanting to focus only on the positive. And she would get really upset with him if she perceived his behaviors as negative. So for instance, if he were to stub his toe and swear about it, if he's carrying the bag of groceries and the bottom drops out and he's like, oh my God, Buck, she would get really upset, right? She would get mad at him. In her desperation to solely focus on the positive, to embrace positivity, she would end up obsessing about his negativity. And this is what can happen a lot until it feels like there's no room for any outburst. There's no room for anger. There's no room for grief. For this particular fellow, it came through as well as trying to process some grief that came up in his life. And that came out in a lot of ways, as I'm sure you know. Grief can express itself as anger, as despair, as frustration, as deep sorrow and sadness. And any expression of that pain, especially an angry expression, would make her really upset. And it's interesting, right? She's supposed to be focusing on the positive so she can stay positive, but she can't stop obsessing about how he's being negative and he needs to change his negativity so she can be positive. So there's a very clear lack of emotional boundaries and personal responsibility or self-governance in this relationship. But this is an incredibly common experience. So I talk to a lot of you guys. I talk to a lot of men who are going through divorce and they're trying to make sense of their wives or their ex-wives' behaviors. And a very common experience that a lot of men have had is that in their marriage, there wasn't space for strong emotion. And this actually goes way beyond just the boundaries of marriage. I believe that our society as a whole has a pretty low tolerance for strong emotion, especially strong emotion coming from men. So what happens is that men become conditioned, often well before marriage, often in childhood, in school, to hold in their emotions, to not show those strong feelings. And women are conditioned to view any sign of intense emotion from a man as dangerous, right? His anger is dangerous. His outburst is a red flag, right? This isn't a safe person to be in a relationship with. And yet there's a flip side that's really a kicker for a lot of men is at the same time as there's no room for their anger or for their grief in the relationship, right? Those are dangerous, bad emotions in men. They're also expected to be capable of these incredible depths of love and passion. So you're supposed to be able to really fully embody these good emotions, but never feel or show any sign of the bad emotions. Right. And I think this is where a lot of marriages start to break down and there's a lot of problems. And it's also a reason that a lot of men come out of divorce feeling incredibly frustrated. On the one hand, you're expected to be this emotionally intelligent, passionate lover. And on the other hand, you're supposed to never experience anger or grief or emotional pain of any kind. Now, it's really easy to blame women for this. And trust me, especially if you have been through a divorce, particularly an unwanted divorce or a nasty divorce, I don't really blame you. Right? Yes, you want to blame the women, and you can. What I've found, though, in my experience, and I've worked quite a lot with both men and women, and I've explored this conditioning and these ideas with a number of my colleagues, I don't blame the women any more than I blame the men. We are all, as a society, we are all operating under a set of societal expectations. And until we as individuals really pause and examine those beliefs and see how they're showing up in our lives, we're really slaves to them. Right? If we haven't looked at it, if we haven't considered what stories we're telling ourselves about how men should be, how women should be, what relationships should look like, we're all carrying around these beliefs and these expectations. And some of mine look different than yours. The ones that men tend to learn are a bit different than the ones women tend to learn. But we're all operating under these expectations and just thinking that that's how the world is or how it has to be until we stop and really question and really look. So I don't think, even if it feels this way, that women are out there setting up these like impossible expectations for men. It's what they've been conditioned to believe relationships are supposed to be. It's what they've been taught, and unfortunately, often by the personal development and coaching worlds, to look out for narcissism, to look out for red flags, right? And any expression of emotion in a man fits those things. So women are confused and dissatisfied too, because what they're told to expect in relationships and what a good or healthy relationship is supposed to look like just doesn't add up with reality, right? You can't have someone who has absolutely no negative experience of emotion and only experiences great love and passion. And that's not what women experience either. And so they often end up with a lot of self-rejection and rejecting their own more powerful emotional experiences. So it's really not women's fault any more than it's men's fault, but it is a big issue in our society in the way we approach relationships. So there's actually a real beauty in this as I see it, because we each have the power to pause and question and look at the societal expectations that we've internalized. You can do that work for yourself. I can do that work for myself, even if my partner chooses not to. Right? Even if my husband chooses not to do that work, even if your wife or ex-wife chooses not to challenge or question her societal expectations, you can go in and challenge them within yourself. And by doing that, by exploring that, you can start to free yourselves from the internal cycles of suppression, from that internal suffering. And you can start to process your own emotions and your own experiences in healthy ways, regardless of what other people in your life are choosing to do. Okay, so what we've talked about so far is that there's this toxic positivity in the world, right? And the basic premise is great, right? We want to focus on creating what we want to create in our lives. We want to shift our own neural pathways away from negative habits, negative defense mechanisms, things that aren't serving us anymore, into pathways that do serve us, right? Into more positive, more capable, more empowered ways of thinking. The basic premise is great. In practice, it often becomes this kind of toxic positivity that leads to suppressing emotion, in particular negative emotion. And there's been this side effect that it really feeds into the narrative that any powerful or intense or negative emotion expressed by a man isn't safe, that that's a dangerous red flag. And this can become a real divisive issue in relationships. So if you notice that you've been suppressing some of your emotions and you want to stop feeling bad, what do? How do you process those emotions in a healthier way? So there's a simple 3-step process that you can follow to start moving through these more intense feelings in a healthier way. So I'm going to list the 3 steps, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail on how to actually do it. So the first step is to recognize and allow the emotion. The second step is to seek to understand the emotion. And I'm going to show you how toxic positivity actually stops that in its tracks most of the time. And the third step is to remember who you are. So let's go through each and I'll break them down and explain what they mean so that you can actually start doing this. So recognize and allow the emotion is just as simple as it sounds, but it's often not easy. So first you have to recognize you're feeling something. And if you can, you want to try to name that emotion. What is it that you're feeling? This sounds so simple. It's actually really hard. If you've been suppressing emotion, simply noticing, naming, and acknowledging what it is might take a lot of intentional awareness and focus. Allowing the emotion just means asking yourself if you can accept that it's there. And I think you'll probably find, if you're like me or any other human who has suppressed their emotions at some time in their life, you'll find that sometimes that's really hard to do. You can't allow it. You don't want it. You want it to go away. When that happens, you want to try to just accept that resistance. You're noticing that this is your pattern, right? You've been taught this emotion isn't okay. You don't want it. You're trying to get rid of it. You're actively resisting what you're feeling. Allow that. Allow the resistance itself. What we're trying to do here is just stop the fight. Start to take a back seat and say, what is it I'm feeling? Can I accept that that's happening? If I can't, can I accept that I'm not ready for that yet? Okay, it's that simple. And it really is just a conversation with yourself. The second step is to seek to understand that emotion. This is where toxic positivity gets in the way. If you notice that you're feeling a negative emotion, right, like anger, then positivity, this whole positivity mindset says that you should just focus on something good. You should try to be happy. You should change those negative thoughts. What happens is you never actually get to go into the anger and see what it's doing, right? Anger isn't there for no reason. It is part of a fight or flight response, right? Which means that your nervous system, your brain has perceived a threat and it's activating your resources. It's giving you the power of this anger to protect yourself. So if you just ignore it and try to focus on the positive, you never deal with that threat and you never create safety for yourself. So you end up trying to focus on something positive when your more primal parts of your brain think that like, there's a bear or a lion trying to eat you. It's really stressful. It's really painful. And honestly, it's a lot worse than just feeling angry. So the seeking to understand is just going in and noticing, what is this emotion? What does it feel like? What is it telling me? Where is the threat? And is there something I need to do about it? And maybe there is, and maybe there isn't, and that's okay. You want to just explore. What's it doing? Why is it there? The third step is to remember who you are, because you are not your emotions. Our language, the English language, is awful when it comes to this, because we always say things like, I am sad, I am angry. You're not sad, you're not angry. You are experiencing the physical sensations of that emotion. You are experiencing sadness, you are experiencing anger. It's not who you are. It doesn't define you. There is more to you than that experience of anger, no matter how intense or strong it is. So that third step is to just bring your own awareness back to that fact. Stop telling your brain that you are this emotion. It's not true, but your brain will believe you if you use that language. And then you will start to identify as that emotion. And now you have this big problem, right? This big obstacle. How do I stop being angry? You don't have to stop being angry. You're experiencing anger in this moment, and that will pass, especially if you do step two and you look at where that anger is coming from and what it's trying to tell you. Okay, guys, so that's how you start to let go of emotional suppression and process your emotions in a healthy way. Recognize and allow what you're feeling. Seek to understand what that emotion is, where it's coming from, what it's trying to do for you. And then remember that it's not who you are, it doesn't define you. If you would like my direct support and help with this, then Better Beyond Divorce, my coaching program for men, might be exactly the support that you're looking for. You get weekly personal coaching, detailed exercises and explanations going into the how and the why of all of the work that we're doing, and daily support to help you get healthy, get happy, and move on with confidence. If that sounds like something you'd like to learn more about, go ahead and book a free consultation call with me. If my calendar is full, you can email me directly at Rachael at Rachael Sloan Coaching, and we can find a time to talk.